You won't believe what just happened on live TV. Senator John Kennedy didn't hold back, exposing Adam Schiff's darkest secrets in front of millions. The look on Schiff's face says it all. This could end his career. Stay tuned. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. This is not a drill, the moment that shook the nation. This is not a drill, Sak. What you're about to hear shocked every viewer in the country. That's how the broadcast began. Dramatic, urgent, and unlike anything viewers expected. The cameras were rolling, and the nation was tuned in for what was supposed to be a routine Senate hearing. But in mere minutes, it turned into one of the most explosive moments in recent political history. The setting? A packed congressional chamber in Washington, D.C., filled with lawmakers, journalists, and cameras broadcasting live across every major network. On the surface, it looked like business as usual. Senators lined up, notes prepared, aides whispering behind them. But when Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana took the floor, something shifted. With his trademark Southern drawl, calm demeanor, and a subtle smirk that seemed to hint he knew something no one else did, Kennedy approached the microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show aggression. What he did was far more dangerous. He started asking questions. Hard questions. Personal questions. The kind of questions Adam Schiff never thought he'd have to answer in public. From the first sentence out of Kennedy's mouth, you could feel the room tighten. He wasn't interested in partisan jabs or surface-level policy critiques. He was going straight for Schiff's past, and not the sanitized, polished version found in campaign brochures. No, this was a raw, unfiltered look into controversies, and whispers that had long been dismissed as conspiracy, until now. Kennedy's delivery was chilling, calm, steady, and deliberate. "Congressman Schiff," he began, "the American people have trusted you with some of the most sensitive information in the country, but many are starting to ask, can that trust be justified?" Gasps rippled through the room. Schiff's eyes narrowed, but Kennedy wasn't finished. He brought up Schiff's early political days, his controversial donors, and questioned whether some of those ties still influenced his decision-making today. Then, he referenced a series of intelligence briefings from the height of the Russia investigation and raised concerns about Schiff's handling of classified material. Schiff, usually quick with a retort, seemed caught off guard. His response was hesitant, vague, and filled with the kind of political language that avoids direct answers. Viewers at home immediately noticed. Social media erupted. Hashtags like the Schiff Exposed and Kennedy Grill Session began trending within minutes. But Kennedy didn't stop there. He played clips. Yes, actual footage from past interviews, committee hearings, and press conferences where Schiff's words contradicted his current statements. Side-by-side comparisons showed inconsistencies that were hard to ignore. At one point, Kennedy leaned into the microphone and said, "Which version of Adam Schiff should the American people believe? The one from 2 years ago or the one sitting here today?" It was a masterclass in controlled demolition. Kennedy didn't need to shout. He didn't need to insult. He let Schiff's record do the damage. And with each clip, each pointed question, the congressman from California looked more and more like a man under siege. The chamber was dead silent. Even Schiff's usual allies avoided eye contact. This wasn't a political debate anymore. It felt like a courtroom cross-examination. And the verdict was playing out in real time. Schiff's body language betrayed him. He blinked rapidly. His hands fidgeted. He kept reaching for water, clearing his throat. At one point he attempted to pivot back to safer ground, deflecting with mentions of democracy, misinformation, and Republican fear-mongering. But Kennedy calmly replied, "Congressman, this isn't about spin. This is about transparency. And right now, America's not getting it from you." That line, that one sentence, was clipped, uploaded, and shared millions of times within the hour. Even some left-leaning commentators admitted it was a moment of reckoning for Schiff. Back in the hearing room, Kennedy concluded his questions and stepped back, not with triumph, but with quiet confidence. He had done what few dared to do, publicly challenge a powerful figure with facts, receipts, and undeniable contradictions. This wasn't just another political skirmish. This was the moment the tide turned. And Schiff. He may still hold office, but from that moment forward, the armor of credibility he had carefully built over the years had been cracked, live, on national television. The secrets they never wanted you to know. So what exactly did Senator John Kennedy reveal that had everyone, from cable news anchors to everyday Americans, glued to their screens? It started slowly, with Kennedy casually flipping through a folder as he stood at the microphone. But what came next was anything but casual. Kennedy looked Adam Schiff dead in the eye and said, "Let's go back to your early days, Congressman, because there's a pattern the American people need to see." That line alone set the tone. Then, Kennedy dropped his first bombshell. He began by outlining Schiff's questionable connections to political donors, specifically donors with links to foreign lobbying firms and foreign government interests. Kennedy pointed to a series of campaign finance records, some dating back over a decade, showing that Schiff had accepted tens of thousands of dollars from individuals and groups that, in later years, would be investigated for shady dealings overseas. One particular name stood out, a now-defunct PAC tied to an international consulting firm that worked on behalf of authoritarian regimes. At the time of the donation, the firm's connections weren't public knowledge. But Kennedy emphasized that Schiff never returned the money, never addressed the link, and never disclosed the depth of that relationship. The chamber shifted. Staffers looked up. Journalists typed furiously. And Schiff? He leaned back in his chair, visibly uncomfortable, but Kennedy wasn't done. He leaned into the microphone again and said, "Now, Congressman, this might make you squirm, but I've got to ask it. Did any of these donors ever get special treatment?" The implication was powerful, even without a direct accusation. Kennedy was raising the possibility of influence peddling, something voters across the political spectrum deeply distrust. And though Schiff didn't respond right away, his body language spoke volumes. Then came the curveball, and this is what truly shook the room. Senator Kennedy turned the conversation to Schiff's high-profile role in the Russia investigation, where Schiff frequently appeared in the media as one of the most vocal critics of then-President Trump. Kennedy questioned whether Schiff had crossed the line in how he handled classified information during that time. Without directly accusing Schiff of leaking secrets, Kennedy said this: "You've held sensitive briefings, Congressman, and yet, somehow CNN always seemed to know the story before anyone else. Why is that?" The room went silent. That question struck at the heart of what many Americans had long suspected, that some intelligence briefings may have been selectively leaked for political advantage. Kennedy cited 3 specific dates when classified committee briefings were, immediately followed by breaking news stories that just so happened to support the narrative Schiff had been pushing publicly. And while Kennedy didn't claim Schiff was the leaker, he made it clear that the coincidences were just too hard to ignore. By this point, the tension was unbearable. Schiff, clearly rattled, tried to interrupt. "Senator, I think you're—" But Kennedy, cool as ever, raised his hand and said, "Let me finish, Congressman. The American people deserve answers, not deflection." That one line went viral almost instantly. It wasn't just what Kennedy said. It was how he said it. Calm, deliberate, and completely unshaken. Schiff, on the other hand, looked cornered. His usual air of confidence had evaporated. He glanced toward his aides. He shuffled his notes, but he had no real comeback. It was a stunning moment. A sitting senator openly suggesting that a senior House member may have weaponized intelligence briefings for political theater, and Kennedy didn't. Stop at questions. He brought documentation, not just campaign records, but archived press statements and video clips of Schiff's previous claims. He drew sharp contrasts between what Schiff said behind closed doors and what he told the public. For example, Kennedy highlighted an interview where Schiff claimed to have seen direct evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, a statement Schiff later walked back under oath. Kennedy asked, "Was that a mistake, Congressman? Or was it intentional?" Schiff didn't answer. By the end of Kennedy's allotted time, the impact was undeniable. This wasn't a political hit job. It was a controlled dismantling, backed by facts, receipts, and carefully timed questions. And while Schiff never collapsed physically, the political damage was clear. His authority, his credibility, and his public image all took a major hit. The American people watching at home weren't just entertained. They were asking themselves a serious question. What else don't we know? The collapse, Schiff's stunning reaction. What happened next stunned even the most seasoned political analysts. It wasn't just a tense moment. It was a public unraveling, broadcast live and replayed millions of times within hours. Adam Schiff, a man known for his sharp debate skills and polished public speaking, was suddenly silent. Caught off guard, his usual cool confidence had vanished. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His hands fumbled with papers. And when he finally spoke, it was nothing like the Schiff the public had come to know. His voice cracked slightly as he attempted to push back against Senator Kennedy's blistering critique. But instead of issuing a firm rebuttal or clarification, Schiff stammered, his words fragmented, his arguments thin. He leaned on generalized defenses, mentions of national interest, protecting democratic norms, and conspiratorial rhetoric. But these phrases, often used to pivot or deflect, rang hollow in the face of the specific documented accusations Kennedy had just laid out. This was not a mere slip. It was a visible, palpable collapse of composure, the moment that cemented it as one of the most dramatic political face-offs in recent memory came when Kennedy played a video clip from just a few years earlier. In it, Schiff, speaking during a cable news appearance, made a bold claim about intelligence related to the Russia investigation. The footage showed Schiff confidently asserting that he had personally reviewed clear evidence of collusion, implying he had seen material no one else had access to. But Kennedy had just reminded the chamber that no such evidence had ever been publicly confirmed, even after years of investigations. As the clip ended, the broadcast director cut to a tight camera shot of Schiff's face. It was a moment frozen in time. His jaw tightened. His eyes blinked rapidly. His lips pressed into a thin, forced line. For a brief second, he seemed to forget the cameras were even there. He looked shaken, exposed, vulnerable. That single frame, Schiff visibly struggling to maintain composure, was screenshotted, clipped, and shared across social media with captions like, "Caught red-handed." The face of a man with no answers. Live on TV, Schiff crumbles. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with reaction videos. Some were laughing, others were shocked. But one thing was clear. The public had never seen Adam Schiff like this before. Even political commentators who typically supported Schiff were taken aback. One progressive-leaning journalist tweeted, "This isn't the Schiff we're used to." He looked genuinely cornered, not by anger, but by his own words from the past. A conservative pundit on cable news put it even more bluntly. This wasn't just a bad performance. This was a political implosion in real time. He couldn't defend himself, not because the questions were unfair, but because they were accurate, and the analysis didn't stop there. Body language experts were called onto news segments to break down Schiff's reaction. One noted, "You can see the stress response. Rapid blinking, defensive posture, minimal hand movement, classic signs of someone mentally scrambling for control." Others pointed to his repeated use of vague terms like "out of context" and "mischaracterized," noting that these are often signs that a subject doesn't have a strong rebuttal, but wants to avoid admitting fault. To be clear, Schiff did not admit to wrongdoing. He didn't storm out. He didn't shout back. But sometimes, the most powerful collapse is the quiet one, the moment when a public figure who's built a career on certainty is left visibly uncertain in front of millions. Kennedy, for his part, didn't gloat. He stood silently, arms folded, as Schiff tried to collect himself. The silence was deafening, and that's what made it so devastating. This wasn't a dramatic shouting match or viral meme-worthy brawl. This was a slow, steady unmasking. Schiff's armor of authority, built over years of confident media appearances and polished talking points, had cracked under the pressure of well-documented questions and undeniable contradictions. Thus, the hearing continued. Schiff's responses grew even more cautious. He spoke less. His voice grew softer. And when the session ended, he left without speaking to the press, a move that shocked reporters who were used to his post-hearing statements. One journalist summed it up perfectly. Schiff walked into that hearing as one of the most media-savvy figures in Congress. He walked out looking like a man who had just lost the script, and maybe part of his political legacy. This wasn't just a rough day in Washington. This was a reputation-shaking blow that could follow Schiff for the rest of his career. Let's be crystal clear. This wasn't just political theater or a one-time viral moment. What unfolded in that Senate hearing between John Kennedy and Adam Schiff exposed something much deeper: the widening gap between power and accountability in American politics. In today's media landscape, where most political battles get reduced to viral sound bites or partisan clickbait, it's easy to miss the bigger picture. But what Kennedy pulled off wasn't just a gotcha moment. It was a surgical strike on a system that too often lets powerful figures operate without answering the tough questions, especially when those figures are the ones doing the questioning themselves. Adam Schiff has long portrayed himself as a crusader for justice, particularly during two of the most controversial investigations in modern U.S. history, the Trump-Russia investigation and the January 6th hearings. He positioned himself as a moral compass, someone who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power and hold others accountable. But here's the irony. In Kennedy's calm, deliberate takedown, it became clear that Schiff might not have been living by the same standards he demanded of others. By raising well-documented concerns about Schiff's political donors, potential intelligence leaks, and shifting public statements, Kennedy did more than rattle one congressman. He exposed the blind spots of an entire political class. The kinds of questions Kennedy asked weren't new, but they were rarely given such a spotlight. Why? Because too often, certain lawmakers are shielded from scrutiny if they're seen as being on the right side of the media narrative. That changed in an instant, and this wasn't just a partisan ambush. In the hours and days following the hearing, criticism of Schiff came from across the political spectrum. Some moderate commentators admitted they had dismissed questions about Schiff's conduct for years, assuming they were just partisan attacks. But after Kennedy's performance, calm, fact-based, and free of personal insults, even skeptical viewers had to admit the concerns were legitimate. One well-known centrist journalist said, "This wasn't about ideology. It was about integrity." And Schiff didn't offer any convincing defense. Another liberal columnist wrote, "You don't have to agree with Senator Kennedy on policy to see that Adam Schiff ducked every major question he was asked. That's not leadership. That's damage control. And those reactions point to a broader issue, a credibility crisis in Washington. When the same people who lecture the public about transparency, truth, and justice are found dodging basic accountability, trust in the system crumbles." Schiff wasn't just embarrassed. He became a symbol of how some in power wield outrage and moral authority when it benefits them, but go silent when the spotlight turns back on them. In this case, what made the moment even more powerful was Senator Kennedy's tone. He didn't shout. He didn't throw insults. He didn't turn it into a political spectacle. He asked direct questions, backed by records, quotes, and video, and he gave Schiff space to respond. Schiff had every opportunity to push back, clarify, or defend himself. But when the time came, he didn't. Kennedy didn't have to raise his voice, because Schiff's silence spoke louder than any argument, and that silence was deafening. It was a reminder that in today's hyperpolarized political environment, facts still matter. and they can still break through the noise. Because even if the media spins it, even if partisans try to cover it up, the truth has a way of landing, especially when delivered with quiet precision. This exchange also revealed something about the power of restraint. In an era where many politicians try to dominate with volume, Kennedy's composure made the impact even sharper. It was a masterclass in how calm truth-telling can be more devastating than any angry rant. So yes, it was dramatic. Yes, it made for good television. But underneath it all, this moment was about something much more serious. Who holds the watchdogs accountable? When leaders demand transparency, do they apply it to themselves? And when the questions finally come, do they face them or flee from them? For Adam Schiff, this wasn't just a rough day at the office. This was a test of his political integrity, and many believe he failed. For viewers at home, it wasn't just about right or left. It was about whether anyone in Washington is still willing to hold the mirror up, even if it means revealing something uncomfortable. And, for John Kennedy, he didn't need to pound the table. He let the facts and Schiff's silence do all the talking. The fallout. What happens now? The moment the Senate hearing wrapped up, it was like someone had lit a political fuse. Twitter exploded. Within minutes, hashtags like "High on Schiff exposed," "On Kennedy destroys," and "Schiff meltdown" began trending nationwide. Clips of the confrontation were uploaded, clipped, memed, and analyzed from every possible angle. On YouTube, breakdowns of the face-off flooded recommended feeds. Across TikTok, young creators who typically don't follow politics were asking, who is John Kennedy and why did he just body a sitting congressman? This wasn't just a political flashpoint, it became a digital firestorm. Mainstream news outlets, usually cautious with framing, quickly caught the wave. Even networks that typically lean left couldn't ignore what had just happened. CNN ran a headline, "Schiff struggles under fire during Kennedy interrogation." Fox News, of course, didn't hold back. "Kennedy goes for the kill, Schiff," left speechless on live TV. Even MSNBC, which has long supported Schiff during past controversies, aired a segment that raised eyebrows. Senator Kennedy surprises with calm yet devastating line of questioning. And perhaps the biggest surprise? Late-night comedy shows, normally critical of conservatives, didn't mock Kennedy. Instead, the jokes were turned toward Schiff's silence, his body language, and the now famous clip of him blinking, struggling to find his words while the camera zoomed in. One host quipped, "It's like his Wi-Fi went out mid-sentence, only it was his brain. It wasn't just funny. It was telling." Schiff, once seen as a relentless prosecutor of misconduct, was now being portrayed as the one caught in his own contradictions. Behind the scenes, Schiff's team wasted no time going into full-blown damage control. They issued a formal statement claiming that Senator Kennedy had distorted facts and used misinformation and selective editing to manufacture controversy. They insisted Schiff's record was clear and that the accusations had already been debunked, but it didn't land because the moment had already happened, live. No amount of spin could erase the footage. Schiff's uneasy expression, the stammering responses, the dodged questions, those were now viral assets in the digital age, permanent and unedited. Even some journalists questioned the timing and tone of Schiff's response. One analyst tweeted, "If this was misinformation, why didn't he say so during the hearing? Why wait until after the headlines and memes hit?" It's a fair point, and one many viewers also picked up on. Meanwhile, Senator John Kennedy's stock among conservatives soared. Already known for his Southern wit and no-nonsense attitude, Kennedy was suddenly being hailed as the only one brave enough to do what others wouldn't, challenge Schiff with calm precision, on live TV, without turning it into a circus. In just 24 hours, his approval rating among Republican voters spiked. Political action committees started rolling out ads featuring snippets of the hearing. Right-wing pundits called for Kennedy to lead upcoming oversight efforts. Conservative influencers dubbed it the Kennedy Doctrine. Calm questioning, with devastating impact. A GOP strategist put it bluntly in an interview. What Kennedy did was simple. He asked the questions everyone else was afraid to ask, and Schiff had no answers. That's a game changer. But the fallout didn't stop there. Back in Washington, the hearing has reignited debates over congressional transparency and ethics. Some lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are quietly calling for Schiff to respond more thoroughly, either in a public forum or closed-door session. There's even buzz that internal House committees may revisit past briefings Schiff participated in, especially those related to intelligence leaks and classified disclosures during the Russia probe. While no formal investigation has been announced yet, the pressure is mounting. And let's talk about the public trust factor. Americans, already disillusioned with both parties, are watching this unfold with growing skepticism. Polls, taken in the days after the hearing, showed a notable drop in confidence toward congressional leadership, especially on matters of national security and truthfulness. A young voter in a man-on-the-street interview summed it up perfectly. It's not about left or right anymore. If people like Schiff can't answer straight questions, how do we trust any of them? And that's the real fallout here. This wasn't just about Schiff and Kennedy. It was a moment that pulled back the curtain on how fragile public trust in government has become, and how easily it can be shaken when the powerful are left stammering instead of standing strong. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a turning point. Whether Schiff recovers or Kennedy's star continues to rise, the political landscape has shifted. And for millions of Americans, this hearing was a wake-up call. No one is above answering the hard questions. And sometimes, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be asked. This wasn't just a hearing. This was a showdown, and possibly the beginning of a new political storm. So the big question now is, will Adam Schiff finally address the allegations in detail, or will this be the moment that marks the beginning of the end for his credibility? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we'll be tracking every twist and turn in this developing story.